Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. Ladies and gents, welcome back to another episode. And this is your host, Eric. Today I'm joined by Drea. Drea, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Just so the audience knows off the bat, we got connected through a mutual friend, Jenny, and I wasn't actually aware of your story. We're super close by, Western Washington. It's not a big community as far as law enforcement, especially when you break down a region of one state. And so it is a small world in kind of an awesome way. But for one, it's great to get connected and meet you virtually through this platform, but then also to learn about your story and hear that you were open to coming on to share that as far as your fight for life and overcoming deadly adversity. I truly appreciate it. And it is very much in vein of the kind of things that we're talking about on this show all the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm always up for sharing my story. Anything that I've been through that can help somebody else, especially in our line of work or just in general, I'm all about it.
Yeah. And that's the name of the game. I think I mean, it took me a long time to get more comfortable with this. And how long have you been in law enforcement now?
I was commissioned in July of 2018, so I'm still somewhat of a baby officer, I guess you could
Oh, you're a veteran now
say.
in today's day and age.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, I truly you're probably decently senior at your department. I feel like that's the thing these days.
Yeah, that 5-year mark is veteran at this point because, after COVID and 2020, a lot of our senior officers jumped ship. And then we're getting all the post-COVID baby cops. And so if you did any policing before COVID, before 2020, you're might as well be considered a vet.
Yeah, that's such a thing, right? Pre-COVID was just a different type of policing. And then no offense to those that came in during COVID and in 2020. I mean, those were crazy times and we are super, super grateful for all the amazing men and women that came into our profession and then are, working alongside us now. But they'll even admit it was very strange.
Yeah.
And they didn't know anything different at the time, except we kept telling them how different it was. And
They're like, yeah, right.
yeah.
And now they're kind of seeing it as the door is slowly opening back up. They're kind of seeing what we've been talking about,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you had a little period, not a little period, it felt like forever, but you could barely book anyone into jail because of COVID and restrictions and all that.
I mean, you're handling things that you would normally handle in person via the phone. I mean, very limited in-person contact. Businesses are shut down. You're not, people aren't doing proactive policing anymore. So, and then everybody's kind of salty, understandably. So you had all these FTOs that are getting these new guys in and they're like, job's dead.
Yeah.
So God bless the COVID cops, for coming in when everybody wanted out. I applaud them.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think you said it really well right there. And in a lot of ways, since 2019, 2020, the type of scrutiny that we've been under, we kind of say, we have a joke in Kent that police years are kind of like dog years because of the pace and the violence, but it's probably more the case everywhere just because everyone was so understaffed and the amount of scrutiny, and there's kind of very few safe spaces. I don't really like to overuse that concept, but truly just being a cop in Western Washington, it didn't feel like you really belonged. It didn't really feel like the community wanted you, even though I love a lot of the listeners that are just very supportive of the community, but it was very few and far between all the absolute hate that you would get all the time.
Yeah, and that was the one thing that was really interesting about my incident is, this awful thing happened to me, and the outpour of love I got from my community absolutely overshadowed that incident for a period of time. The cards and letters and gifts I was getting from people all over the country, just wishing me well, thankful I'm here. And especially during a time where you couldn't turn on the TV and, not be told you were a POS. And so
Mhm.
I'm getting these cards and it made me realize like, hey, there are people out there that do support us, that do care about us. And it was really, that was like the silver lining of everything from after my incident.
Yeah, when was that?
So I was, I guess I'll just come out and call it a stabbing. I was
Yeah,
stabbed
yeah.
in March of 2021.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will get to that shortly, and the listeners should be like, "Come on, let's just talk about it." But no, like I do want to walk us in a little bit, Drea, and just kind of ask about like what brought you into law enforcement. And I mean, it's very obvious just from our little intro, like you came in at you're getting your feet kind of grounded at a and then a really hard time, and you're clearly with it still today, even after all that we're talking about, and even after being stabbed, which is like something I absolutely cannot relate to. So yeah, like what brought you in, and can you tell us a little bit about your start in the career?
So it's interesting. I worked at a coffee stand in downtown Olympia and I trained horses on the side and I was planning on being a nurse.
Mm,
I was in all my pre-nursing and I worked at this coffee stand, like I said, in downtown Olympia, and I had some veteran OPD officers who would come through my stand frequently. And I got a lot of grit to me. I'm quite sassy. And these veteran cops, I mean, they're all retired now. They were around for quite a while. They would come through and they'd be like, Dre, I really think you should be a cop. And I'd always kind of shrug it off. And it's interesting being a woman in this job, how I meet other females that aren't cops and I meet them and I'm like, oh, you'd be a phenomenal cop. And they shrug it off because I just don't think it's something a lot of women just see themselves doing right off the bat. And so they kept kind of bringing it up to me. And I think I had my last straw with human anatomy in science class. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to go test in. I'm just going to humor it and I'm just going to go test in. And I swear it was like a vacuum. When you are going down the path you're supposed to go down, it just sucks you right in. And I scored really, really well. And I was hired with the Thurston County Sheriff's Office within, I think, 6 months of testing in.
yeah,
And it felt right.
that's
So I
great.
kind of essentially I fell into it, I guess you can say. It was never a goal of mine. It was never a dream of mine. It was just something somebody saw in me and I kind of trusted their opinion.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you see this a lot, and even people that didn't grow up wanting specifically to be a cop or a first responder. Like, there's usually that very obvious caretaker, caregiver type of mentality or desire, right? Like you're looking at nursing, and so it's not like a far cry to see you pivot towards this thing. And I love how you had obviously pretty good interactions with these cops, and now you feel it in yourself when you talk to other women, right? You're like, hey, like you got the stuff, like it'd be great for you to be a cop or consider this. And I think that that's a good reminder for all of us to recognize that in all of our day-to-days, like we are representing something where it's a profession, it's a culture, and we gotta stay positive as best we can, because you
Mhm.
may be interacting with like that next generation that's going to be contributing to our team.
Yeah, 100. And this job's fun. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's again, there are aspects of it that are god awful. Let's be honest. I mean, it takes a bit of your soul every single day, but there are aspects of it that are so rewarding. And just the best part is the people you work with. I mean, we have fun. We have fun every day and we help people as much as we can, right? I mean, we're such a sliver of this big chunk of wood, but nonetheless, we're still part of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's so true. It's like it's all up to how you look at it. And are you familiar with Man's Search for Meaning? Viktor
No.
Frankl. So he was a doctor, and he was a survivor of concentration camps, including Auschwitz. But I actually haven't. I've heard about it so many times, but I hadn't actually read or listened to it until literally today. But so much of it is about this survivor mentality, and how he was able to look at like the bright side. And he comments on so many survivors looking at the little things that just kept purposeful and supporting one another in the camps, and how quickly you could see the people that were just resigned to a bad fate versus those that were just still in it, and every little thing, like just even trying to recognize like how it's nice to have like a moment alone and how it's nice to like look at that bird flutter by and like sing songs in the hall, even though like this is arguably like the worst fate that anyone could kind of be put into. So many lessons from that. So I just love how you even brought up like, hey, it's fun. Like But that is a choice, and I think that we all need to remember that we have this choice.
Oh yeah, and I have to remind myself there are absolutely days where I'm like, I don't want to do this. Like I'll, would rather rot in bed, and I force myself up and I go to work, and sometimes I walk in the door and I don't want to be there, but I force a smile, I say hi to everybody, and I hit the locker rooms and I get dressed, dress down, and I just hit the road. But yeah, there are absolutely days you don't want to do it, but you kind of have to trick your brain.
Yeah. Do you feel like when you do that and you recognize it, like it makes it easier? It's almost like a muscle that you're kind of working.
Yeah, and I think after my experience, so many things happened to my brain that I was I mean, unfamiliar with. It was all new. It was all super scary. So I just deep dove into, how the brain functions,
Hmm.
life after a traumatic experience. And I kind of learned that I have this saying, like your brain, when it gets, pretend you're on a ski lift and you get off that ski lift, your brain's going to want to take the path of least resistance. It doesn't matter if at the bottom of the hill there's a bear that's going to eat you. Every single time, your brain's going to want to take that path of least resistance. So you have to start creating new paths. And sometimes it's being positive, it's looking at the silver linings. And sometimes that's just really, really difficult, especially when you're surrounded by all this hateful noise or this negative stuff going on around you. It's hard work, but I mean, there's nothing negative that can come out of it.
Yeah. That's such a good point, right? Like forming that new path, and it might not be the easy path, but when you're intentional and you try, you are basically conditioning that new path to be easier, right? Um,
Mhm.
I think about it a lot and try to even put on the flip of, I was talking to a group of guys recently, and I was like, if you have a problem with the snooze button, just recognize like you can hit it or you can make it a competition. Like, no, beat that snooze button, like aka like don't hit it. Like beat the alarm, like spring out of bed, like turn the alarm off, don't snooze and don't get back in bed. And now you've like crushed that thing that used to be kind of this super this super nagging habit, that you just kind of fall, I suppose, like victim to, right? Like who's ever hit the snooze button and like 5 minutes later is like, well, I'm glad I did that, um
Oh,
so
100%.
yeah.
I'm still working on that.
Okay.
I'm a snoozer. I'm a
Well,
snoozer.
yeah, try that tactic and be like, okay, like I'm gonna make this snooze button my bitch, right? Um,
Yeah,
and let me know what you think if it
I'll
works.
try.
Okay.
I'll try my best.
All right. Well, if you're ready, as much as you want to share and how you want to share it, let's talk about your incident.
Yeah, of course. So on March 26th of 21, I was working an overtime detail. We have a community in Thurston County that paid us to go in periodically throughout the week and do house checks and just kind of patrol this little gated community. And so I was working this overtime detail. I believe it was going from 8 to midnight. And I remember being in the parking lot of the office, and our responsibility was to do these house checks, just do traffic enforcement in this small neighborhood. And if any calls for service came out in this neighborhood, it was our responsibility to kind of handle them. So I got there at about 8 o'clock, and I think I want to say at 8:30, I got a suspicious circumstance within the neighborhood, and it was a kind of a known house, kind of an, I don't want to say a problem house, but it was a known house. And somebody had called in and said that a man was there making her friend nervous, and they believed he had a knife. And it was kind of a suspicious circumstance, a welfare check.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just remember being annoyed because, like, man, I'm working my 4 hour shift. I just want to do my house checks and,
Get
I
it
don't
done,
know,
right?
watch funny videos. Yeah, get it
Yeah,
done.
that's fair.
Um, so I remember checking. I remember my gut kind of telling me, like, well, where's your second unit? Because, you work for the county. It's few and far between where you get a backup unit. But
Mm-hmm.
I saw that one of the other units had answered up to back me. And I looked to see where he was at. And he was at, the community was in a small town called Yelm. And he was at the Yelm PD station. So it wasn't that, I mean, maybe a 5 minute drive, 5, 6 minute drive.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, I'll just start that way. So I get to the house, I check my AVLL again to see where my backup is, and he's not that far from the residence or from the park or from the neighborhood. So again, the call wasn't there wasn't a lot of information. I know dispatch tried to call the elderly woman that I was essentially checking on, and she answered, said she couldn't talk, and hung up, which should have been a huge red flag for
Mm.
me. Um But again, it was kind of, when you work county work, there's like this part of you that's just takes care of business. Like, okay, go handle my calls, go
Yeah.
handle my screen. So I got there, um, and she lived in a travel trailer, and it had like one of those permanent roofs above it, and then it had a ramp that led up to her door.
Hmm.
And so I saw them on the pop out in the window, and I was like, I took my flashlight and I just hit the side of the trailer, and then I offset myself like you always do, about 10 feet max to the left, because there was just, I don't want to say junk, but there was junk all over the
Sure.
place. There
Yeah.
wasn't really a lot of places to go. And I remember, so to give some backstory, well, I guess I'll get into that later, but essentially nobody knew who this man was. Nobody had a name, nothing like that. She opens the door to this trailer, and he was standing, this male figure. He was 6'2", easy 230. I'm 5'1", 115 pounds. He's standing next to her, but behind her. And I remember she was an elderly woman and she had oxygen, and
Mm.
she looked like a bear was standing behind her, a big giant bear. I can't stress that enough. And I immediately, the hairs in the back of my neck stood up, and I knew, I mean, I don't have a crime. I have no authority at this point. I'm just checking on her. I know he has a knife, but there's no threats with the knife. There's nothing like that I'm aware of. And so I tell her, I was like, I remember her name, and I asked her to step out of the trailer and off to the left. And I said to him, I'm like, hey, bud, I know you got a knife. Don't go for it, and we're good. And the second I said that, he whipped the knife out, and he just came charging at me, and he was on like a 3-step landing. And so I'm drawing my gun, and I cracked my first round from my hip, and then a second round and a third round. But by the time I cracked off my rounds, that 10 feet just turned into 2 feet, and he came down right on my neck. Um, the first shot definitely saved my life. I think it shattered his femur. So he was unable to get that forward momentum to keep kind of charging at me. The second one got his elbow, and the third one hit his lung. And I swear I could hear the air leave his body, and he just hit the ground. And at that point, I, called out shots fired. I've been stabbed. Lot of blood. I mean, an offensive amount of blood. I remember I had to holster my gun real quick because I couldn't get the blood to stop. I couldn't get pressure on it because he literally just got me right above my vest.
Yeah. You're pointing at like just above your clavicle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, I mean, well, you can't really see it, but you could see where they cut me open for emergency surgery. But he hit an artery, but just missed a main one. I think I lost 2 liters of blood in
Man,
total. Yeah, it was a lot. It was pretty intense.
that's
So I remember,
half a gallon, folks.
yeah, it was a lot. Well, and I don't know the total after I got to the hospital because I had clotted on scene, thank God. But when I got to the hospital, I unclotted. So they had to rush me in for emergency surgery, and they cracked open my whole sternum like they would an open heart surgery,
Jeez.
to kind of figure out where the damage was, to repair the damage, things like that. But I remember when I was bleeding out, I mean, it was, you don't forget things like that. It just felt like hot, thick water running down my whole chest, down my legs. And I remember trying to put pressure on it, and I couldn't. So I stayed freakishly calm the whole time. And I mean, even my radio traffic, my tone never really went up. But I took off my vest. I holstered my gun. I took off my vest, and I took out my gun, and I took a knee. I remember taking a knee and holding in my gunpoint because I didn't know if he was dead. I didn't know at that time.
Yeah.
So, and I remember, if there's one thing I can tell everybody, is tactical breathing is real. You got to do it. I could feel my heart rate going up, and I was like, okay, if I'm losing blood, I want to slow that down. So I started tactical breathing, slowing down my
Good
heart
for you.
rate. And I took a knee because I didn't know if I was going to pass out. And I was like, if I pass out, I don't want to hit my head. So I'm going to take this knee. So if I do hit the ground, it's not that far. And so I remember my backup unit showed up. And as he detained him, I put my gun in my holster. And then as soon as I heard him say, "I got you," it was like computer down,
Wow.
and I just was out. And then I only remember waking up two other times. One when they were doing CPR on me, I briefly came to. And then the second time when I was getting wheeled into the hospital. And then I woke up from emergency surgery, but that's all I remember.
That's a lot.
Yeah. It was pretty intense. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't get much more intense than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I want to kind of rewind back a little bit, and I mean, there's so many takeaways. I mean, there's the tactical, there's the mindset, and so I'm just gonna start spitting stuff out. But I mean, on the jump, like you talk about your your instinct, right? Like the hairs in the back of your neck, and so I say all the time, like for people coming into the job or for people that are learning the job, like listen to that, right? That there's a reason why that's there, and
Mhm.
training and awareness and tactics and all that just heightens that, right? Or that situational awareness. But like that is kind of that guttural primitive kind of response, right? To warn you from danger. But man, like I'm just gonna kind of zigzag. I'm so glad that you're a survivor, right? Like that's so good. Like good freaking work on so many accounts. That's fantastic, right? We don't get a lot of wins, when we have a critical moment like that. We, the community, your people, your family, your department could have lost you easily in that. Like you just detailed how close a call it was, but in that, like you stayed in it, right? Like a threat, emerges, split second, you start firing, shots on, right? Like that clearly saved your life as you detailed. So, I mean, shooting from immediately from the holster, like that's something we train. Like, you just turn it as quick as you can as soon as it clears. And so if people are in an agency where you aren't training that, like that's worth considering, right? Like the statistics indicate like most shootings are at very close range. So that's why we do that, right? So quals should be and training should be a lot more than just check boxes, right? Like bring your mindset in and imagine it's more than paper. And then just like the awareness in the moment and the mindset in the moment, how you were very cognizant, it sounds like, as far as like tactical breathing and like that's training, and you think about these things so that in the moments of extreme stress you can do what you want to do, right? Which is to slow your heart rate, which is going to be losing less blood, right? And I
Mhm.
love how you even recognize like, hey, threat's not over, guns out, I'm going to take a knee. Like that's so smart. And I whether it's smart, intuitive, a mixture of all these things, like that's amazing. And I think that, anyone listening, if they're in this job or even if they're not, like, sometimes things happen and they listen because they want to be better prepared for life and safety. Like that is such good awareness that you can only really get there through training. And a lot of that is training your mind to be ready for that kind of stuff.
Well, not, to piggyback on that, not be afraid to make a decision,
Mm,
right? Like there was no hesitation in my choice, right? The second he pulled out that knife, I had made that decision. Like I'm going home,
yeah.
right? Like you're not, and I'm kind of like my whole life, I feel like essentially prepared me for that moment. As corny as this sounds to some people, I've grown up riding and showing horses and breaking out horses and, being the first one on a 3-year-old colt, and my mindset and my energy putting into, getting on this horse for the first time, I have to stay calm. I have to think about his next step. So essentially, my whole life, I've been kind of prepared to stay calm in pretty dangerous situations, nonetheless, because I know freaking out isn't going to help me.
Hmm.
Freaking out and panicking isn't helping anybody. I mean, unfortunately, sometimes it'd be nice to, but
Yeah, I don't think it sounds corny at all. And I do like to think that all the things, I don't think that there's really a thing like fate, like we don't have a choice. I think it's the contrary, right? But like the things that we do and what we bring to situations, like determines where it's going to go, right? And things kind of lay out as they should or as they may. And yeah, we can't control the past, but we can absolutely control like every moment and influence the future, right? And I think that
absolutely.
that's such an example, like right there, right? Like you've been training for this your whole life in a way that who would have expected.
Hmm. Absolutely.
What was the recovery like? And I know that there's a lot of that's going to probably go in a lot of different directions, but off the cuff, like what do you recall about that?
So physically, I want to say hands down that was the easiest part, right? The physical part of healing is always easier. It's when you get to the mental part that's kind of a little overwhelming. But, I stay fit. I'm in the gym. I try to eat a, 70-40 diet or 70-30 diet where I'm predominantly healthy. So my body recovered fairly quickly, but 10 out of 10 don't recommend you getting your chest cracked open because that healing was not fun. You felt like an elephant. I felt like an elephant was sitting on my chest for weeks. And then when they shoved the emergency breathing tube down my throat, they scratched my vocal cord.
Mm.
So I eventually had to go back in for surgery to get a huge piece of scar tissue removed from my vocal cord because I couldn't talk and I could hardly breathe. I just had this thing just blocking my airway. But after that, I mean, I was stabbed the end of March and I was back to work on light duty mid-September.
Man, that's
So,
pretty quick. And you don't sound like a lifetime smoker, so that's good. You don't have like the
no.
gravel in your voice, so they did something right fixing that.
And that's exactly what I sounded like as it healed, and I had this huge grape size scar tissue on my lung
Yeah.
or on my vocal cord, excuse me.
Yeah. That is so nuts. And I mean, you say the physical part is easy, and certainly like I mean, that only starts to paint the picture of, probably what we're going to talk about next, but that is no small feat. Like that is an extreme injury. And I'm not trying to compare, but I've told the story about how my canine was stabbed, and like in 2 weeks, right? Like animals are crazy. Like, and you grew up with horses, but like what they're
Mhm.
able to do and how they're able to recover versus humans is something I say like, how long it takes us. But then like I love how you already paint the picture like, hey, like the physical's fine. That was not the hard part. But I also like that you paid credence to your body and your own ownership of health, prior to and ongoing.
Oh,
It's like,
100 I that's one of the most important things I think people can maintain through this career is their physical health.
hmm and like I'll just say it like if you weren't in good shape at the time, like we don't know how that would have ended up. It certainly would not have helped you, right? Like your heart
No.
rate would have been going faster, whether you would have had the reaction time, who knows? Like whether you have the literal like human resources to shuttle nutrients where they need to go and get oxygen to your brain to make these decisions as you're on the fade once your backup gets there. Like again, like I mean I preach it all the time, right? Like just we need to make this like a part of our lifestyle because it's absolutely like very much part of the job. It's not an optional thing.
No, it's not. Absolutely not. Because again, I always say I just drew a short stick that day. Like I'm not special. Like any one of us could have gotten the call and we all would have had to handle it, right? And how are you preparing yourself to handle said call?
hmm
How's your agency preparing you to handle said call? And, act accordingly. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me more about the healing beyond the physical.
So, it's such a huge thing because I'm still going through it, right? I always tell new people getting into this job, say goodbye to the person you were before this job because there's going to be a whole new road ahead of you and you're going to see changes within yourself that you might not understand initially. And, I always preach figuring out a way to be self aware and have some emotional intelligence and work on those things because those are going to benefit you the best moving forward in this job. It's just being self aware and having some level of emotional intelligence. For me, the first thing was flashbacks. I remember being in Hawaii like it was yesterday. I was at the 808 cafe getting my beet salad and I'm standing in line and it's the most beautiful place on the planet. And all of a sudden I look down and I just visualize blood shooting out of my neck. And I just remember going, what is and I remember having like this ick moment and I'm in line and I go, ugh, and I just physically shook and like try to shake it out of me. And then that was my first one. And then they started happening more frequently.
Like a
And so I was
horror
like, oh,
movie.
this
I'm sorry to interrupt, but like that's like a horror movie.
it literally was. And then I would visualize the person, him stabbing me, charging me. And it just happened on repeat. I mean, at one point, I think I had 15 in one day. And I was like, I can't have this happening. And so I reached out to a gentleman by the name of Dr. Kirkpatrick. He works very closely with Tacoma PD. He is a godsend. And he's got a lot of knowledge when it comes to like the science basis of why your brain does the things that it's doing, why you're reenacting it. You know, I was having nightmares, things like this. And he absolutely worked me through it completely to where I don't really have flashbacks. I don't really think about it like that. I don't think about the actual incident per se.
Yeah.
I mean, if you told me I was going to watch a video of I mean, unfortunately, we just lost an officer in New Mexico who was attacked,
Yeah. Yeah. I was
you know,
thinking about that. Mhm.
and, my sergeant, he was like, hey, we're going to debrief this and talk about it for training points. But he's like, are you comfortable watching it? I was like, yeah, it's probably best I don't. Right.
Yeah.
And I don't have any problem saying that. Like, I don't feel like it takes away from my ego. I
Yeah.
don't think
Good for
it
you.
means I'm not capable of doing this job. I'm like, you know what? If I watch that, my body temperature is going to skyrocket. I'm going to get really hot. I'm going to have anxiety. I'm probably going to be snappy all day. I'm just going to be irritable. So why do that?
Yeah, that's so responsible, and I appreciate you doing that. And good on your Sarge to ask, right, and to have that kind of, like, I guess, safety to just talk about these things that are on our mind. Like, that's really mindful of him, you, and your crew to not have judgment in that. I think
Mhm.
that, I mean, I've heard stories where we had this old school culture where it's like, oh, dead body, oh, that's traumatic. Like, hey, let's get the new people out here to see this. And I know that the intent was to acclimate you, right, and it's training and all these things. But now I like the fact that when there's a bad scene or when there's something that happened to a kid, like, a lot of times the people that have been in already are like, hey, you don't need to see this. Like, can you go talk to that person across the parking lot? Because you're limiting this unnecessary trauma to more people. And so I really appreciate that share, and that people should be mindful of as they work in their agencies.
Yeah, and I think I always say everybody has calls that are going to affect them differently, right? Like I have a really hard time with crying babies. And not just like I'm not a mom or anything like that, but there's a difference between a baby who's crying because they're irritable, and there's that difference between a baby that's like
Mm,
not being given enough attention, not being fed, and you can tell the difference of cries. And those just hit me like a ton of bricks, right? Whereas some people have problems with DV victims or dead bodies, whereas dead bodies really don't do much for me. I think it kind of circles back to having that emotional intelligence and being self-aware and being open to say, hey man, like for instance, when I worked at county, I could not stand dispatching deer. I couldn't stand it. And so I would call up the guys and be like, hey, I'll take all your paper calls, come shoot this deer. I'm not doing it.
yeah,
Just and having an environment where it's not like, oh, you can't handle this, and it's because it's not that serious. You know what I mean?
yeah. No,
I
it's
think
yeah,
And it's all about balance. I think there's like a certain level of where you should turn the pressure on people, right? We don't get to cherry pick always what we want and don't want to handle. Like there's that perfect balance of like buck up buttercup, and then there's that level of like, hey, let's empathize, let's have some sympathy, let's kind of give them some grace. But I think it all boils down to balance. It can't be just nonstop hazing, but then on the other end, it can't be like, let me hold your hand through this, because that's not the reality of it either.
yeah. I like how you put that, right, and it does go back to that introspection that you talked about way earlier, right? Like, just know thyself and like know the playing field. You talked about emotional intelligence, and then along with that self awareness is like awareness of others. So like you kind of talked about that too, and that's so key. I mean, I think that I'm aware of a certain type of person that thinks that it's all just soft, dumb stuff, but it's literally just, do you want to know like what's going on in your own brain, in your own like sense of self? And then do you want to be able to interact well with others and like know what they're going through as well? Like, do you want to pick up on that so you can have this well-oiled team? Well, like, that's literally
Mhm.
what it is. So, no, thank you for bringing that up. When you talked about the flashbacks that kicked up when you're on vacation, did you have much exposure to talking to someone, a professional, prior to that point?
Not really, no, but my agency at the time, the sheriff's office, they did a phenomenal job. My lieutenant, my sergeant at the time, I mean, hats off to them because they were super proactive about it. They had numbers ready for me. I remember when I was like, I just want to get back to
Hmm.
work because that's just all I've ever known. I've held a job down since I was 12 years old. Go back to work. It's fine. Everything will be fine. because that, I mean, I guess the flashbacks and all that stuff didn't get to me. It was other things down the road that got to me, but I tried to minimize it. I tried to minimize the whole thing as much as I could. I remember when I got my procession driving home, I was like, why are we doing this? Like,
Mm.
it's not, I'm not dead. Like, this isn't a big deal. Like, we're moving on. And it wasn't till, honestly, it wasn't till Ella French from Chicago,
Yeah.
the Chicago PD officer, died, where I really, that's where I think, I wouldn't say I spiraled, but I started noticing like these shifts and changes in me. But my agency at the time, they're the ones who kind of linked me up with Kirkpatrick at first. They were the ones who were like, Dre, you don't have to come back to work right away. Like, take your time. Like, I was the one who was like, oh, I'll be good. I'm fine.
Mm. What do you think? What do you think that a younger Drea could have heard that may have encouraged her to power down, take some time, and go talk to somebody in that type of situation?
You know, I don't think anything would have helped, to be honest. I think it's just, and this goes for most people, right? Everybody's on their own little pathway.
Hmm.
Everybody's on their own little journey. People are going to discover things however they discover them, whenever they discover them. And for me, it was like a cumulative of things, right? And I kept trying to fix it. How do I explain this? I kept trying to use old methods from pre-cop Drea to fix post-stabbing, post-cop Drea, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
And it wasn't working, oddly enough. And I ended up leaving my county agency and I went city. I thought, oh, well, new job, more money, new environment, that's going to fix everything,
Hmm.
which it did help a lot, honestly, because I met I met one of my best friends. I met a lot of great people and I started making more money. My schedule was, the same. We were 5 on, 4 off, 5 on, 4 off, 5 on, 5 off, but I'm making all this money. I'm kind of able to do more fun stuff. But I found myself just kind of, my home became my cave. I didn't want to leave my
Hmm.
house. If I did leave my house, I had some pretty morbid thoughts. I'd be at the gym on the Stairmaster and somebody would walk in and I'd be like, I wonder if he's going to shoot this place up.
Mm.
And I would constantly map these things out 24/7 and it became just exhausting. And even worse, I'd go out with friends and I'd be sitting there and just feeling numb. I would just be sitting across from some of my best friends, the people I have the best time with, and I'd felt nothing. No enjoyment, no sadness, and I was just, well, time to go home. And I would just get up and I'd leave, and I found that happening more and more frequently, where I just didn't want to leave my house and I didn't want to be around anybody.
Yeah, and just for those of us that don't know you well, like prior, would that have been a weird thing? Like, were you not a homebody before? Not to that extent.
Not to that extent, not to the extent where like I'm always a jokester. I'm always laughing and I just and I would just get up and leave. I was the queen of the Irish goodbye. Like I would just all of a sudden, where'd Dre go? Nobody
Mm.
knows. She's gone.
Yeah, yeah. And that's so impactful. I think like that recognition of, Gil Martin talks about it, emotional survival, but like the used to's and like how the job can change you if you're not mindful and you don't take effort towards. But like, certainly a critical incident like yours, that was very much life and death. Um, when you earlier talked about Doc, giving you some explanation and maybe some vocabulary as to like what was going on with your brain or why were the flashbacks occurring. What were your takeaways from that helped you understand a little bit of that?
So I didn't spend a lot of time with Kirkpatrick, but he gave me some tools to kind of help me, as we talked earlier, like trick your brain,
Mm.
right? So one of the best tools he gave me is he's like, whenever you're imagining or whenever you're seeing the blood come out of you, think of something absolutely ridiculous. So he's like, whether it's rainbows shooting out or glitter, he's like, just do that. And so I would.
Mm.
And as my brain was able to figure out, like, oh, that doesn't happen. Glitter doesn't shoot out of you like blood. So eventually it just would stop.
Interesting.
And then my brain would move on to the next step and it would visualize the trailer. And it was just very dark and gloomy. And then it would visualize my suspect, my violator, coming at me. And I would start visualizing him. And as ridiculous as this is, I would turn him into Elton John and I would make it like a whole musical. And the whole key was with these flashbacks is you'd have to visualize them in a picture frame or a movie or a movie theater. And I don't, I don't know the science
Yeah.
necessarily behind it, but just making something so real, so
Yeah.
ridiculous helped stop them.
Yeah, is the framing to like remove yourself from it? Like so you're watching
Yes.
it, you're not integrated in?
I'm assuming, I mean, again, I'm not a
No, that's so
doctor, I'm not a
fascinating.
therapist, but it's crazy how much your brain controls things
Mhm.
and how easy it is though if you do the work it is to kind of counter it,
Yeah.
right?
This
So your brain's just trying to survive, and the kicker is sometimes the things it's doing to survive are what are killing you. And I'm always saying this incident didn't kill me quickly, but it had the capability to kill me slowly.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, it's like again, you gave the illustration that, as a metaphor, this is like carving a new path. And like the more you do it, right, the more you imagine, yourself getting cut and then glitter and rainbow shooting out. Like the more, like the first time it's probably like, I don't even think I can do that. But then, it
Mhm.
becomes more routine because it's just like exercising that rep. It reminds me of like when I would get nightmares as a kid, and how you would, people would tell you to like think of something silly, and when you're in a dream it's hard to do in the moment, but then sometimes you have those lucid dreams where you're like, well, this isn't real, and then things start getting ridiculous rather than scary. It's kind of where my
Mhm.
mind went.
Yeah, and that's kind of exactly what helped me substantially stop having these flashbacks. And he every time I'd go to therapy, I'd have to read the call. So every time I had to read the call, I listen to my radio traffic. So I can listen to my radio traffic and it does nothing
Mm,
for me. We went to the scene. So essentially there was a lot of overexposure and reliving it over and over and over and over again. So that way I could somewhat process it a little better, if that makes
yeah.
sense. We definitely didn't shove it under a rug.
Yeah, I like that. And I like a lot of what you're sharing because it's such a different, it's different than my shooting. And for listeners, like I'm not trying to compare. But when I was burned, like I was looking for those triggers. I was kind of expecting that type of response just because you hear about it. Like I went to the scene, and I've told the story so many times. Like I went to the scene and there was propane involved in the explosion that we got burned from. And I was like lighting up my barbecue at home and like yelling at my then girlfriend, now wife, and saying like, hey, if I start yelling, like I might be having some sort of like a flashback, right? Like I'm kind of trying to make light of it, but I also like how you talk about the recalling of the story. And for me, like it was kind of like an extreme story that I got really used to telling in public. And then, I've been on recordings talking about it, and I almost have like my script where I realize like I'm totally comfortable talking about that, and I make light of a lot of parts of it, and I talk about how ridiculous it was. But then I was recently on a different podcast, and the host started asking me about what I remembered about, how my family reacted to it. And then it took me into this really emotional piece. And I was like, oh, and like, and I don't like, I'm not blaming her at all. It was really a nice conversation. And again, like you, I like to share because I do believe that these conversations will help somebody, and we just need to have all these shared experiences to uplift each other and destigmatize a lot of the conversations about having conversations simply. But yeah, afterwards I just felt so freaking drained. Like I was thinking about like
Mhm.
my daughter, and I was thinking about like my wife and my mom and all these things, and being back in that time and coming back to work. And even though a lot of your loved ones are just shy of begging you not to, that's a lot. That's a lot.
It is a lot. And it's always again, it's like I said, Kirkpatrick was really good at the science part of things, like, but then there was this emotional aspect, right? Because
Mm,
no matter what, I remember when I realized it was bad, when I was like, "Oh, this isn't a scratch." I remember the first thought I had is, "Gosh, my mom's gonna be so sad." And even when you say that, you choke up a
mm-hmm.
little, right?
Yeah.
Because that does the love for your significant other, your parents, those things, you carry that with you 24/7. And like you don't want to think about those things. You've been to I always tell new guys any opportunity you have to go to line in the line of duty death service as horrible as they are to go to, it's important you kind of open yourself up to that reality and your family as well, because that this it's something we don't have control over. But like I said, there was this emotional aspect to all of this that never really
Mm.
heals, right? You know, especially going back to work. Like I'm back to work. I'm back with the belt on, the vest on, and my mom has to swallow that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a thing. Were there other practices or methods that you recall helping you, for people to think about or to talk to their professional about?
So again, everybody's different. For me, I mean, I kind of want to, I don't want to say, again, I think I said earlier, I felt like I was spiraling, but I had a lot of survivor's guilt. And then I started putting an abundance of pressure on myself to have it all figured out. Like I needed to have everything society tells me I'm supposed to have. I went back to uncomfortable relationships. You know, wasn't leaving my house. I mean, the worst is when I'd go to work and I just felt, I mean, I remember we got a warrant for a house and my big buddy's just booting the door down and, you know, everybody's yelling and well, not everybody's yelling, but everybody's amped
Mm.
up. And I just felt I'm in the back holding the warrant and just like felt
Mm.
nothing, nothing, no, nothing. And I remember at that moment going, this isn't good. I might need to take a little bit of a break
Mm.
from this job and kind of recap what's going on with
Yeah,
me.
you're so like
Because again,
unplugged.
100% unplugged. I mean, there wasn't a day that didn't go by where there would be moments where, I mean, this is pretty dark, but I was like, gosh, I don't feel like me. And I don't think I'll ever feel like me again. This is not good. How do I get back to me? And no matter how many Elton John concerts I played in my head, there was a shift in me and I couldn't figure out what was going on.
Where do you think the survivor's guilt came from?
Again, after the Chicago officer Ella French
Mm.
died, I remember her best friend from work was posting all these videos of her, and I could relate to a lot of those videos because they're me and my friends at work just being goofballs. And then other officers locally started passing away, and then when I got my Medal of Honor, I felt horrible because Lexi and the Vancouver officer were awarded that night or that day, and their families are up grabbing their medals for them, and they don't get to go home to their families. And then I was the last one to go, and I went up there and I was just like, I feel awful,
Mm.
you know? And I wish I could answer where the survivor's guilt came from. I don't know. I think I want to say I'll give myself grace. I think it's
Yeah.
normal. I think it's normal to be a part of this profession. And we've had such a rough couple years. And to, you know, go home and know other people don't get, I think that's a normal
Yeah,
response. I
it
don't
absolutely is, and you actually did answer the question well. You know, it's just recognizing like you felt guilty to be the one that like overcame what you did exactly as everyone like textbook like wants you to do, and oftentimes when someone's injured that badly, like an officer doesn't get that. Like it's a celebration that that flips right. Like you flip that into feeling bad that you get to be here and they didn't. Um,
Mhm.
it's very common. You're absolutely right, and I appreciate that insight because it is really common. Even with Diego being killed a number of years ago, like I recognize so many of my colleagues and friends that had different layers of survivor's guilt. Right, like they felt guilty that they weren't there. They felt guilty that they were back home out of state. They felt guilty that they had changed shifts or changed assignments. Where like what if they would have been there, and then people feel relieved that it wasn't them, and then they recognize that and they feel really guilty and really terrible about that. But these are, like as you said, these are absolutely normal, right? And so again, it's just like talking about that, and you put it so well, like we got to give grace. You
Yeah,
would never accept your best friend feeling that way, like burying themselves that way. And I think that's the best way I can think of sometimes to flip some of these into objectivity, right? Where you're like, okay, we have so much negative self-talk as just humans these days, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Would you accept someone else, or like maybe accept isn't the right word, but would you let your friend bear that guilt without challenging it. And like, certainly you wouldn't. Certainly we wouldn't.
Well, and just to piggyback on friends, like friends and colleagues, I wouldn't be in uniform to this day and doing what I'm doing and have the outlook that I have now, if not be for friends and family. You know, I have a phenomenal support system that when I wasn't even capable of leaning into them, they were pushing down my door and kind of forcing me to, you know. So I'm really fortunate in that realm. You know, I had great friends, I have great
Yeah.
friends, and I have great family that, you know, were bringing me food when I wasn't eating, were checking on me 24/7. And you're always going to be tested, right? There's going to be You're going to have your naysayers and you're going to have your people that have something bad to say, but that's not your business, right? That's their own issues, right? You just got to focus on the ones that are supporting you and want to see you through it, you know?
Yeah. Man, that's so good. I think I just read that like I'm a huge fan of like Stoic philosophy. Are you familiar? Like, do you subscribe to that kind of stuff?
I'm familiar. I'm not huge in
Yeah.
it, but I'm very familiar.
There's a quote and it's very much along the lines of like what other people think of you isn't your business. And like
Mhm.
it's literally like some dude in ancient Greece said that and it makes so much sense. You think about it, you're like, yeah, like why would I need to know? But yeah, we put so much importance in that at times and it distracts.
Yeah, and I mean, we're all guilty of it at times, right? I mean, we're all a bunch of type
Yeah.
A's. We want to be you know, everybody's hero, and we want everybody to think we're great. I mean, who doesn't? Um, you know, cops, I think, are first responders in general are more prone to kind of like needing that acceptance in some way, shape, or form. But I mean, I'm my own worst
Yeah, for
enemy. I'm
sure.
my own worst critic, right? Like nothing you say about me, I probably haven't said about myself. So I'm just gonna try and change my own narrative. I can't change yours because I'm having a hard enough time changing mine.
Mhm.
Like so.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing at a time. And you mentioned it before, but I think it is a good reminder to circle back to, but like, yeah, it's an ongoing thing and it doesn't just go away. Like it's scar tissue, right? And like you're always going to feel it and sometimes like, I don't mean to like literally talk about scar tissue when you got like attacked and almost killed with an edged weapon, but yeah, like sometimes like there is that thing, it's never going to feel the same, right? There's always going to be that pain
Mm-mm.
point if you push on it. And I think that that's a good allegory for like these traumas. And sometimes there is no physical component. It's like purely emotional, right? It's something we saw or something we experienced, um, something we were just witness to or responded to. And like, again, it's just give grace and take time. And yeah, we may never be the same. I've sometimes likened this job to uh like Lord of the Rings, where Frodo had the ring too long and so he's kind of messed up, and so they're like, well, you could
Mhm.
get to go live with the elves, and he's just kind of like a shell of a person. And I think that like that's a little bit dramatic, a little extreme, but I think that there's some degree. And maybe like if we hold the ring, what that looks like if we hold it too long, it's like we don't accept our friends and family. It's like we don't accept these challenging and really uncomfortable things, like talking to a professional, or like, okay, that I didn't feel great about that. I Rather than write it off, like maybe talk to a different professional, or maybe unplug, right? Like take some more leave or take a day. When your sarge offers you a day after you go to a kid call, like take that, right? Like we need to normalize these things more and more.
100%. You have nothing to I think it's such a complex conversation because there's so many roots to this job, right? You have the administrative side, you have the civil side, you have the community side, you have the family side. Like there's all these hats we have to wear. And then there's, you know, we're still kind of transitioning to this openness to mental health awareness and things like that. So keeping all these roots in mind while keeping our mental health in mind, it's like we're still trying to find that connection. Like where can I say like, hey, I need some time off, and it not be circled back to a year down the road when you're in a critical incident, somebody throwing that in your face. Like these are all things we're having to have these conversations within our own head,
Yeah.
right? And I think we're getting there for sure. We're getting there, but it takes people coming out and being more open about
Yeah.
it, I think, and being more honest about it. That's my biggest, I want to say my proudest moment in this career for me wasn't my shootings, wasn't any of my arrests. It's when I stepped back from the job And I took, after I got hired with my new agency, and I kind of had this moment where I'm like, I'm not okay. I need to take some time and get some sleep because I wasn't sleeping, eat some food because I wasn't eating, and just focus on being in my own skin and not focus on trying to be in my skin and serve and protect and make sure my partners are
Mm-hmm.
safe. I my guy had just gotten sentenced, and I did my sentence, impact statement. And I remember afterwards I went to the gym, and one of our, in my opinion, one of our star local cops. He's a young kid. He's just our golden retriever. He's amazing.
Every
I have high
department's
hope
got at
for him.
least one. Yeah.
Yeah,
Love it.
he's just a great kid. He's got a good heart. He's super eager. Adore him to pieces. He was in the gym and he was like, "Dre, high five!" And I thought he was talking about my sentencing, the sentencing. And he was like, "You're such a badass." And I was like, "What? Oh yeah, it was pretty cool. I'm glad that's over with." He was like, "No, that's not what I'm talking about." He's like, "You stepping back and taking time out."
Mm,
He's like, "You just showed me," because he's a newer officer. He's like, "You just showed me that if I ever need to do that, it's okay to do it." And I remember I'm in the gym and I'm like holding back
mm.
tears because that to me is my proudest moment. Like knowing that he can go on in his career and he can hit a wall and he can say, "You know what? Dre took some time. I can take some time."
Yes, I love that. I recently had a one of my officers that I've known for years and worked with for years. Like, he did that, right? He took a day and we talked about things, and not only like I felt like this proud dad, right? Only because I've been doing it longer, and only because of a rank, I suppose, and you're just more disconnected, so you feel like at least for me, like learning this new role is kind of like you're more removed, so it's almost like you know that the kid has training wheels off, and you can't keep up, and they're going to go faster, and you just hope that like you've been doing the things you can like instill. But I truly do feel like that extreme pride and like just so grateful when I see that taking hold, right? Like an officer, oftentimes a senior officer is like, yeah, I'm taking a day and I'm not apologetic about it. And I'm able to be brought into that conversation and say like, yes, and people are watching and you have so much respect, street cred as it were, but also just like, you're just a good freaking hardworking dude that everyone that you work with looks up to you. And so I know that that's working, but then also like giving extreme praise and feeling this extreme pride when supervisors are like, hey boss, like I want to give this person a day. I'm like, yes, like it's working, right? And so I'm like very much,
Just even for people to be given those
yeah,
options,
yeah. And like
right?
I think like, yeah, I'm fully in along with you when we are going the right direction, like things are happening, and we just got to keep moving and keep having these types of conversation and normalizing these aspects of the culture. And it's not to say people have to take time, but like they should
Mhm.
absolutely be offered, and they should absolutely think about it and not feel bad if they're unsure, and they just err on the side of taking it, right?
Yeah, I mean, this job's not normal,
No. Yeah.
right? It's not normal. It's not normal to see people on their worst days every single day. Like the taxing of addiction, the taxing of domestic relationships, child neglect. Seeing that stuff on the daily is not normal. And your brain has to start dehumanizing something to get you to keep going to work every single day, right? It's your brain has to do something to make it seem like what you're doing is normal and to cope with it, right? And how do you keep your humanity and still do this job, maintain healthy relationships, do all that stuff? And sometimes that's taking a break,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah, well, I love I love the accounts that you gave, and I mean that's really like that allegory that we hear a lot, which is like you got to put your own oxygen mask on first, and that's
Hmm.
that's the thing. Like if you don't take care of you, like you're not going to take care of anybody in the long term. Maybe you can grind through for a
You'll
little
be
bit.
that statistic,
Yeah.
heart attack, overweight, multiple divorces,
Mm-hmm.
alcohol. You'll become a
Yeah.
statistic, and nobody wants to see that, right?
Mm-hmm.
None of us want to see that.
Yeah. So what's helping you now? Like, what's helping you like go out there, still crushing it? You're taking care of yourself. Clearly, like fitness and health are still priorities for you. Like, what are some of your routines that help you along in this resilience that you're demonstrating?
So again, I'm still a work in progress. Like I still have my good days, my bad days. I mean, like I said, there were times where I had a whiteboard next to my bed. like, hey, you need to get up. You need to not look at your phone. You need to get up. You need to go on a walk. You need to do something, right? I think routine is kind of important. I didn't have a horse for a really long time. I got a horse, so I'm at my barn. I have my two dogs. I, you know, Leaving my old agency had, I'm super grateful for my time there, but changing the environment was really important for me. Like lateraling to a city agency. Again, different uniform. I don't have a take home car anymore. So, as something as silly as that 20-minute drive to work and my 20-minute drive home, that I can detach a little bit, that has been extremely helpful. So, none of my gear is at home. Um, again, just being kind of honest with myself, getting out of unhealthy relationships and focusing on the healthy ones, right? Just being honest with myself. And, my family and my friends have been major. Like, they're able to kind of call me on my shit. Sometimes I need to be called on my
We all do.
shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Um, and I'm still in therapy. And again, I've just started becoming super curious about why I've done and do the things that I
Mm.
do, right? How can I be a better version of myself? Like I have these habits that are there. They're not going anywhere. They're not changing, but how can I kind of work around them or be familiar with why I'm doing something and then have a little bit more grace and acceptance as to why I do some of the things that I do, if that makes any
Yeah, it
sense.
does. Absolutely it does. I love that accountability buddy, that like calling out culture because yeah, we can be introspective until we're not. Like we're gonna have blind spots. It's just human nature, right? And so I've likened this too, like when I got way too cynical really early on in the career and I share that because I'm not proud of who I was. I'm not proud of how I conducted myself and how I talked to people in and out of the job for a good stint, right? And it's not like it goes away, right? I can be this positive voice, but absolutely I still have my moments where I talk to members of the public or coworkers or family in a way that like I'm not super proud of. Like I get it and very much a work of progress, but I we I love the notion where you accept, and sometimes we have to proactively like hit up those people close to us and say, "Hey, I thank you for calling me out," and or like, "Hey, if I go down this road and start talking like this, like please do that again," right? Whether it's next week or in
Pull me
5 years. Yeah, yeah,
right?
for sure. Like
Yeah, pull me out of
that's
it.
like the whole buddy system, and I love the notion of curiosity, and it a lot of why I like it. It keeps popping up in my life in different ways. Like I'm going through this like leadership training, and it talks about how to have like engaging conversation and like be curious, right? Like ask, be interested instead of interesting, like trying to be interesting. Um, but even like with my daughter, like she's almost 5, and she's learning so much, and she asks a lot of questions. I'm trying to praise that, and I'm like, hey, like you're really curious. I love that, right? Like she's like curious George. I'm like, yeah, sure, okay. Um, but I also love like the curiosity notion because if you're curious, you're not going to be judgmental, right? Like you're wanting to
Mhm.
learn more rather than assigning a value or something to someone or yourself.
Oh, 100%. And a lot of people always ask like, "Well, do you think if you left this job that, you know, you'd be fine, you'd be better off, right?" And I'm always kind of like, "Well, bad things happen to people all the time, right? I didn't That could have happened to me out of uniform, in uniform, right? But I wasn't going to let this one person take away one. I'm good at this job. I enjoy this job, and like I said, I see my impact here and there, right? And I'll ride that wave all day long. But I'm not going to let one person, one awful human being, ruin something I worked really hard to have. But again, this job's not normal, but it's very, very rewarding. You got to kind of keep trucking
Yeah.
along.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the same whether it's you or me or any officer, like yeah, as you feel great and you want to be here, like be here. And then at any point if you're
Hmm.
like it's not really aligning anymore, like that's okay too, right? And that's the thing I got really accustomed to saying from recruiting. I was like, hey, whether you got 2 years or 20, like thank you for your service, thank you for being here. But yeah, thank you for being here. And I think
Yeah, of
there's
course.
so much ground that we covered that certainly a lot of takeaways, a lot that I'm still chewing on through this conversation. I feel very grateful for this conversation, being able to share this time and space with you and learning so much I continue to try to learn about experience and how we can best support everyone in this job.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me.
absolutely. Is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners with, or how they can get in contact?
No, and that's a tough one for me because I'm a firm believer that everybody's different, right? What might work for me might not work for somebody else, right? But I mean, I have an Instagram, I'll share stuff and you can share me and that can get kind of put out there. Biggest takeaway from it, I mean, what can you say to people doing this job, right? Again, kind of circling back to what we talked about earlier with, you can choose to focus on what's going wrong or you can choose to focus on what's going right. You will have your bad weeks. That's okay. You'll have your great weeks. That's okay too. The human experience is a tough one, and you just got to give yourself grace and keep
Yeah,
plugging away.
we're just we're human, and we keep learning about being human one day at a time, right?
100%.
All right.
Yep.
Well, thanks so much, Dre. So where can people find you on
Yeah.
Instagram?
My handle is Miss Drea Nicole, Miss_Drea_Nicole.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
And it'll be in the show notes. Thanks again so much, Dre.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.